The BJP unveils its manifesto for a new India, promises Ram Temple and a tough response to terror. The opposition calls it Sankalp Patra, a book of lies. Days after dropping the two stalwarts, BJP President Amit Shah calls on L.K. Advani and Murli Manohar Joshi. Is this an attempt to pacify the upset veterans? Congress General Secretary Jyotiraditya Scindia says the party is open to post-poll alliances with the BSP and Samajwadi Party. In an exclusive interview to Beyond, he says the BJP has no copyright on cows, Hindutva and temple politics. Massive drama unfolding in Madhya Pradesh. Tax officials search Chief Minister Kamal Nath's close aides for the second day in a row. Congress says the BJP is using government agencies to target political rivals. And a boost for India's electoral process. The Supreme Court directs the Election Commission to increase random checking of VVPAT slips from 1 to 5 in every constituency. It's finally here, election week. The first phase of polling is 3 days away. Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of India Election Watch. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay, and this is the only show that gives you updates and analysis, clear, concise, to the point, without any twists and spins. We wrap up the election day in less than 30 minutes. Let's bring you up to speed with the biggest stories of today. The race has truly begun. Just 3 days to go for the first phase of voting, and the BJP is just in time with its manifesto. The BJP's headquarters in Delhi was a packed house today. Understandably so, all the party bigwigs were on the stage to release what the BJP is calling its Sankalp Patra. It's a manifesto of 75 promises, and here is the crux. On national security, the BJP promised to speed up defense purchases, zero tolerance on terrorism. They said a free hand to security forces. On the citizenship bill, the BJP continues to stand by it. Not only does the party want to complete this process in Assam, it has promised to extend the National Register of Citizens across the country. Now for the constants. Two promises that the BJP has been making since the time of the Jansangh. Scrapping Article 370 that gives a special status to Jammu and Kashmir, and Article 35A, a law that doesn't allow outsiders to own property in Jammu and Kashmir. Next comes agriculture. Besides giving 6,000 rupees to farmers every year, the BJP promises to issue interest-free credit card loans and short-term agricultural loans up to 1 lakh at 0% interest rate. And finally, the issue of the Ram Temple. Once again, the party has promised to build the Ram Temple in Ayodhya.
आजादी के 100 साल हो तब देश डेवलपिंग कंट्री से डेवलप कंट्री की ऊंचाई को कैसे पार करे। और ऐसी बहुत सी बातें कह सकते हैं हम, लेकिन मैं 2047 की ओर नहीं ले जा रहा हूं आपको, लेकिन 2047 का जो मजबूत फाउंडेशन है 2019 से 24 में रखना होगा। 75 वर्ष 75 लक्ष्य ये हमने तय किए हैं। 75 निश्चित कदम हमने तय किए हैं। ये अपने आप में टाइम बाउंड, वेल डिफाइंड, शायद ही कोई घोषणा पत्र में या संकल्प पत्र में आप पहली बार देख पाते होंगे।
Now here's the interesting thing. This is not a 5-year manifesto. The BJP has laid out the roadmap till 2047. That's taking optimism to a whole new level. What about the Congress? Now that we know what both parties are offering, let's compare the two manifestos. We identified 6 promises that may prove to be clinchers, 6 issues that will guide the choice of the voter this time around. First up is national security. After the Balakot attack, it is on the priority list of both the Congress and the BJP. As we told you, the BJP has promised to modernize India's defense forces. They want to make India one of the most powerful defense forces in the world. The Congress promises the same, but they also want to re-establish the National Security Advisory Board. Next is the issue of poverty. The BJP wants to bring down the number of poor to single digits in the next 5 years. The Congress promises Nyay, a direct cash transfer of 72,000 rupees every year to India's poorest 20%. Issue number 3 is farmers. The agrarian distress. What is either side offering? The BJP once again promises to double the income of farmers by 2022. The Congress wants to go easy on loan defaults. Right now it is a criminal offence. The Congress says they'll make it a civil offence. Next on our list is employment, jobs. The BJP says it will extend support to what it calls 22 major champion sectors of the Indian economy. The Congress promises to fill 4 lakh government job vacancies within a year of forming a government. Then comes education. The BJP promises to bring all secondary schools under Operation Digital Board. This is an attempt to leverage technology to boost the quality of education. The Congress wants to spend 6% of the annual budget on this sector. And finally, the contentious National Register of Citizens. The BJP wants to implement this across the country. The Congress wants to make changes to the existing provisions. So there you have it, the best of both the manifestos, the best of the worst. Of course, a political war over manifestos is bound to happen. In fact, it's already begun. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley says the BJP's manifesto is a nationalist one.
This manifesto, in a season of manifestos, is not prepared with a tukade mindset. It's not even prepared with an Ivy League mindset.
So that's the manifesto war for you. Our second story, and this has gripped the mind space of the voters and the politicians alike. Why are close aides of Kamal Nath being searched? Is this a case of political vendetta? Or is the Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister hiding something? It began on Sunday. At least 50 locations were searched by income tax officials. The authorities conducted more searches today. They happened simultaneously in Bhopal, Indore, Delhi and the National Capital Region, the areas surrounding Delhi. Reportedly, around 10 crores has been seized from these premises. Aides of Kamal Nath are being questioned. Those searched include his former officer on special duty OSD Praveen Kakkar, former advisor Rajendra Miglani, Ashwini Sharma and executives linked to firm Moswar Bear. Now this is a company that is owned by Kamal Nath's brother-in-law. Needless to say, this has become the latest flashpoint between the BJP and the Congress. The Madhya Pradesh police clashed with the Central Reserve Police Force, the CRPF, on Sunday. This was right outside the residence of one of the aides of Kamal Nath. The CRPF personnel were accompanying teams from the Income Tax Department. The CRPF team said that the Madhya Pradesh police is not allowing them to do their job. The state police, on the other hand, said that they were responding to emergency calls from within the residential complex. Essentially, they were both doing their duty. The whole thing is a reminder of the face-off that happened between the CBI and the Mamata Banerjee government in West Bengal not a long time ago. When the CBI tried to question the Kolkata police chief about the Sharda chit fund scam, it sparked a political firestorm. First, a few CBI officials were detained. Next, Mamata Banerjee went on a demonstration. She accused Prime Minister Modi of launching a coup against her. A similar tussle is now playing out in Madhya Pradesh. Expect the war of words to continue. Meanwhile, the Election Commission of India has weighed in on this row. It has asked the Revenue Department of the Finance Ministry to inform the poll panel about any raids when the Model Code of Conduct was in force. The poll watchdog has also strongly advised that all enforcement actions should be absolutely neutral, impartial and non-discriminatory. Ultimatums, threats to launch a new party and now a war of words. The rift in the Yadav clan is widening by the hour. The power battle between Lalu Prasad Yadav's two sons, Tejasvi Yadav and Tej Pratap Yadav, is getting ugly and epic. Tej Pratap is comparing it to Mahabharat. There was a time when Tej Pratap positioned himself as the charioteer Lord Krishna and his brother Tejasvi as Arjun. But now he calls his brother Duryodhan. So what has caused this twist? How did Tejasvi Yadav become a Duryodhan overnight? Just like the Mahabharat, this too is a very long story, so let me give you the gist. In the epic, the Pandavas wanted 5 villages. Duryodhan did not accommodate them. It led to war. In Bihar, that story is replaying. Tej Pratap wanted tickets for 5 of his candidates. His party, the RJD, did not agree. His brother did not agree, basically. So Tej
हमने अपनी बात को रखने का काम किया कि हमको 2 सीट चाहिए शिवहर और एक जहानाबाद के लिए।
So his brother Tejasvi Yadav did not even agree to that. That was grouse number 1. Then there was a personal battle, the battle for the Saran constituency. Tej Pratap's father-in-law has been given ticket from Saran. Tej Pratap's marriage is on the rocks. He's filed for divorce. He did not want his father-in-law to be given a ticket. So an angry Tej Pratap Yadav first floated a new outfit called the Lalu Rabri Morcha. Then he threatened to contest against his own father-in-law. Meanwhile, Tejasvi Yadav is fielding candidates and his father Lalu Prasad is not taking sides just yet.
देखिए, हम कल रांची गए हुए थे। रांची में हमको अब हमारे पिता से मिलने नहीं दिया गया। अब कारण क्या है ये हमको नहीं पता, लेकिन जेल मैनुअल के आधार पर अगर देखा जाए तो परिवार के सदस्य जो हैं वो मिल सकते हैं अगर सुपरिटेंडेंट चाहे तो। अब सुपरिटेंडेंट को हम फोन करते रह गए, कोई फोन नहीं उठाए।
Complicating the story further, Tej Pratap Yadav tweeted that he will forever remain with the RJD and he threatened to destroy anyone who tries to come between him and his family. Now that's very interesting. There is anti-incumbency against Nitish Kumar and the only one who is muddying these waters is Tej Pratap Yadav himself, not quite sure who he is threatening here. Ahead of this election, Tej Pratap Yadav's tweets are confusing everyone from Delhi to Patna, and more importantly, they threaten to split the votes of the RJD. The Congress, meanwhile, has got itself a new campaigner, husband of Congress General Secretary Priyanka Gandhi. We're talking about Robert Vadra. The businessman was quoted as saying that he will now campaign for the Congress party across India. And he's starting with canvassing for brother-in-law Rahul Gandhi and mother-in-law Sonia Gandhi. He will accompany them as they file their nominations from Amethi and Raebareli. It should be okay, his family after all, but here's the problem. Robert Vadra is accused of corruption, massive corruption. He is under investigation. So his announcement to campaign is music to the BJP's ears.
रॉबर्ट वाड्रा ने कहा कि वो भी कैंपेन करेंगे कांग्रेस पार्टी में।
मालूम नहीं, वो उनके कैंपेन के लिए एसेट है कि हमारे कैंपेन के लिए एसेट है।
But here's the thing. There isn't much left for Mr. Vadra to damage in Uttar Pradesh. The Congress is already in a pretty bad shape. They failed to form an alliance, the so-called Mahagathbandhan. Now they're being attacked by all sides, and instead of fighting back, they say that they're open to a post-poll alliance.
So are you saying that the Congress is open to the idea of a political realignment with SP, BSP?
In politics, all options are always open.
He said that they're open for a post-poll alliance, and he may have shot himself in the foot with that because the statements coming from the other side are far from conciliatory. Mayawati, Akhilesh Yadav and Ajit Singh of the Rashtriya Lok Dal held a joint rally in Western UP's Deoband on Sunday, and they spared neither the Congress nor the BJP. Both Akhilesh and Mayawati asked people not to quote-unquote waste their vote by voting for the Congress.
यहाँ पर पश्चिमी यूपी में और खासकर आपके सहारनपुर मंडल में, मेरठ मंडल में, मुरादाबाद मंडल में, बरेली मंडल में, ये कुछ ऐसे मंडल हैं जिन मंडलों में तो मुस्लिम समाज की आबादी काफी ज्यादा है। मेरा खासकर इस चुनाव में मुस्लिम समाज के लोगों को ये कहना है, आप लोगों को मैं ये सावधान करना चाहती हूँ और आप लोगों को भी मालूम है कि पूरे उत्तर प्रदेश में कांग्रेस पार्टी इस लायक नहीं है कि वो भारतीय जनता पार्टी को टक्कर दे सके। गठबंधन ही इस लायक है कि वो भारतीय जनता पार्टी को टक्कर दे सकता है।
And now on KYC, Know Your Candidate, we focus on the BJP's Mahesh Sharma, a sitting member of parliament from Noida, that is the Gautam Budh Nagar constituency in the state of Uttar Pradesh, also a minister. He's contesting again. Noida votes in the first phase on the 11th of April, 3 days away. Mahesh Sharma is 59 years old. His record as a member of the Lok Sabha reads like this. He logged 97% attendance, that's well above the national average of 80%. He's been involved in just one debate. He raised no questions and he moved no private member bills. His constituency is above average in terms of literacy rate. houses with electricity and power. Mahesh Sharma originally hails from the state of Rajasthan. He joined the RSS, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, as a child. He then moved to the BJP student wing, the ABVP, the Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad, and eventually became part of the BJP. A physician by profession, he owns the Kailash Group of hospitals in Noida. In the last 5 years, Mahesh Sharma has been appointed as a Minister of State with independent charge for culture and tourism, civil aviation. He's also been named Minister of State for Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Mahesh Sharma won 50% of the votes in the last election in 2014. He's hoping for a repeat, but it is not going to be easy. Things are not looking great on the ground. 6 months ago, violent protests broke out in Kachera village. Local farmers are fighting against a big realty group over land acquisition. Why is this village important? Kachera. This is the village that Mahesh Sharma had adopted under the Sansad Adarsh Gram Yojana in 2017. Basically, he promised to improve the quality of life for the residents of this village. He failed to do so apparently. The locals are furious. They've even put up a board at the entrance of the village, and the board reads this: BJP members not welcome. Mahesh Sharma's biggest challenge comes from the BSP's Satvir Nagar, who is popular among the rural voters apparently. Over the last few weeks, there's been much discussion, debate and furore over the release of one movie. Now, why am I talking about a movie in an election show? Because the movie I'm talking about is none other than the Narendra Modi biopic. The film was supposed to be released on the 5th of April. The censor board is yet to certify it. The Supreme Court says that it cannot decide until the censor board has decided. The opposition has already decided the movie shouldn't be released. It has questioned the timing. The first phase of elections begins in 3 days, as I've been saying, 11th of April. That's when the makers of this film want it released now. Listen to Vivek Oberoi, who plays Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the film.
I believe that fundamental right to free speech and free expression will be upheld by the Supreme Court. I believe we will get their blessing, and we will release this time around on the 11th of April, where nobody will be able to stop us.
So why the fuss over the Modi movie? Can films impact elections after all? History tells us that politicians are afraid of criticism in movies, and they use cinema as a publicity tool. Aandhi is a famous, often cited example. Aandhi, which translates to storm in English, did actually cause a political storm in India. It was loosely based on the life of then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. Much was said about her resemblance with the lead actress. Even the posters hyped it up. They said, "See your Prime Minister on screen." And this movie showed the heroine smoking and drinking. It was released on the 14th of February, 1975. For 26 weeks, this film was still taken for what it was, a film. But after Indira Gandhi declared an emergency, Aandhi was taken off the screens, it was banned, the posters were taken down, the prints were sent back. But here's something that you may not know. Indira Gandhi's uneasiness with films did not begin with Aandhi. During the 1971 election, a Tamil satire known as Muhammad bin Tughlaq was released. Noted Tamil journalist, lawyer, dramatist, actor and filmmaker Cho Ramaswamy had made this movie. It was a satirical take on an autocratic politician who fools people into believing that he was the mercurial Muhammad bin Tughlaq of the Tughlaq dynasty. The movie spared no one, neither the Congress in the centre nor the DMK in the state. Movie screens were damaged. There were reports of attempts to ban it. The film did not hurt either party. But Indira Gandhi remembered the movie. Come emergency, she punished Cho Ramaswamy. She even censored ads of his weekly magazine Tughlaq. Kissa Kursi Ka, another satirical film made in 1975, in fact, faced severe backlash from Indira Gandhi's government. The movie spoofed Sanjay Gandhi's auto manufacturing plans and Indira Gandhi's governance. Even the negatives of this film were burnt. After emergency, Sanjay Gandhi and the then Information and Broadcasting Minister V.C. Shukla was sentenced to jail over this. Former Tamil Nadu Chief Minister MGR made many movies after he quit the DMK and launched the AIDMK. He targeted the DMK. He targeted the government through his films. He appealed to specific vote banks like fishermen ahead of elections. He won the polls, but there is nothing to suggest that he won the polls because of his films. So here's the thing, the furor over the release of a politically loaded movie around elections is not new in India. Politicians opposing a movie is also not new. What's new is the trend of open biopics in election season. There has never been a biopic on a contemporary politician contesting for the top job in Indian politics before this one. Another point, movies hold a huge sway over the public in India. Several South Indian actors became chief ministers in Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. The trend continues to this day. With the protest against Modi's biopic, concerns over freedom of speech have also resurfaced. It was expected. But when the model code of conduct is on, a movie blurs the line. There are limitations on campaigns, there are deadlines, but how do you implement those on films? The courts are yet to decide. On Did You Know Today, we discuss dummy candidates. Who or what are they, and why are they in the fray? Dummy candidates have names similar to a more established candidate. They serve just one purpose, splitting the vote by confusing the voter. Let me tell you why this is a serious problem. In 2014, in Mahasamand, Chandu Lal Sahu of the BJP was up against 7 contestants with the same name. Anyone would be confused if they had to choose 1 out of 8 Chandu Lal Sahus. Every party faces this problem. Be it Hema Malini in Mathura in 2014 or Captain Amrinder Singh in northern Punjab or even Ashutosh. So why are they even allowed? Because this is not illegal. The Election Commission of India cannot debar a contestant based on his or her name. And this trick is as old as elections in India. Clearly, there is something in a name. In this edition of the Lok Sabha election, the threat of dummy candidates has intensified, especially in Andhra Pradesh. Praja Shanti Party, it's a little-known party, and this party, Praja Shanti Party, has fielded 19 candidates with the same name as candidates of Jagan Mohan Reddy's YSR Congress. The party's logo and symbol also resemble those of the YSR Congress. The matter has reached the Election Commission. Rahul Gandhi also has to fight independent candidates K.E. Rahul Gandhi, K. Rahul Gandhi and K.M. Shiv Prasad Gandhi in Wayanad, besides fighting the left and the BJP candidates. In Maharashtra's Hingoli constituency, there are 6 Subhash Wankhedes in the fray, including the Subhash Wankhede of the Congress party. So what does the Election Commission have to say about all of this? It says that the onus, listen to this, the Election Commission says the onus to expose fakes is on the real candidate. That's very convenient, I have to say. The Election Commission says that it puts up the list of all contestants with their symbols outside the polling booth for awareness. Now, if you cannot tell the difference between 8 Chandu Lal Sahus, it's your problem. In 2015, after the Bihar Assembly election, the Election Commission introduced a measure to check this problem. It started putting the face of candidates against their names in voting machines, but that has not stopped political parties from using this trick. So do dummy candidates even impact elections? The short answer is yes, occasionally they do. Here's an example. In Kerala, in which this practice is prevalent, there has been an impact. In 2014, K. Sudhakaran of the Congress party was a sitting MP from Kannur. He lost the election by 6,566 votes. Little known K. Sudhakaran Srisai and K. Sudhakaran Kolod polled more than 7,000 votes together. The result could have been very different without these dummy candidates. So is there a fix? Not yet. In a country as diverse as India, symbols and names matter. And as long as names matter, these tactics will be used. The onus is on the poll panel to keep a close tab on the campaign of these namesakes. Maybe it's time to think about a punitive law to tackle this problem. Why just fake news? Let's start the cleanup with fake candidates. On that note, it's a wrap on this edition of India Election Watch. Do keep your tweets, your feedback coming in with the hashtag India Election Watch. Thanks very much for joining us.